The concert hall buzzed with excitement as the final seats filled. Golden chandeliers shimmered above rows of velvet chairs, and the murmurs of well-dressed patrons mingled with the rustle of programs. It was a night designed to celebrate greatness, a tribute concert honoring the legendary maestro Lorenzo Bellini, the world-renowned classical pianist. But unknown to most in attendance, this night would be remembered not for Bellini's performance, but for something far more profound. Backstage, 11-year-old Elijah Carter sat quietly, his fingers gently brushing the polished keys of a practice piano. He couldn't see the brilliance of the concert hall, nor the sea of curious faces waiting on the other side of the curtain. Born blind, Elijah had never known the difference between darkness and light. But his world was not without color. His mother, Tamara, a former choir singer, had taught him to experience life through sound. Every voice, footstep, and vibration painted stories richer than any vision could offer. "Are you nervous, baby?" Tamara asked, crouching beside him. Elijah shook his head, a faint smile curling his lips. "Not really. Just listening." She followed his gaze, though there was nothing there, only the thick curtain and the sounds of chairs shifting and programs fluttering. He had a way of hearing the world that even she couldn't quite grasp. Tamara stood up and straightened his sweater. "Just remember, you're not here to prove anything to anyone. Just play from your heart." "Like we practiced," Elijah whispered. Moments later, a staff member appeared. "Ms. Carter, Maestro Bellini would like a moment with Elijah before his performance." Tamara hesitated. They were just guests tonight. Elijah had been invited as part of a youth outreach initiative, nothing more. There had been no mention of performing. "He wants to meet Elijah." "Yes, ma'am. Said he wanted to talk to the boy who listens with his soul." Maestro Lorenzo Bellini stood center stage, his silver hair slicked back, his tuxedo tailored to perfection. Despite the accolades and awards decorating his career, he wore the gentle calm of a man who had learned to appreciate life's quieter moments. He turned as Elijah was guided on stage. "So, you are the Prodigy," Bellini said, kneeling slightly to meet Elijah's level. "I've heard much about you." Elijah tilted his head. "I've heard a lot about you, too." Bellini chuckled. "Touché." There was a pause, gentle and unforced. "Do you like Chopin?" Bellini asked. Elijah nodded. "I like how his music sounds like it's thinking." "A beautiful way to put it." Bellini looked to the audience, who were growing curious. "Would you play something? Just for fun?" Tamara stepped forward. "He wasn't expecting." Bellini held up a hand gently. "No pressure. Just a few notes. For me. For yourself." Elijah stood still for a moment. Then, quietly, he approached the piano, guided by instinct rather than sight. The crowd murmured, unsure what was happening. He sat, exhaled, and placed his hands on the keys. And then he played. What emerged was not a rehearsed piece or a mimicry of the classics. It was a pure, soul-touched improvisation, a melody that danced between fragility and strength, as though the piano itself were speaking a forgotten language. The room stilled. Even the fidgeting ceased. Every note told a story. Bellini froze. It was not the technical brilliance that astonished him, though that too was there. It was the depth, the intimacy. Elijah played as if his fingers were guided by emotion alone, bypassing thought, transcending expectation. When the last note faded, a silence hung in the room. Then came a thunderous applause. Elijah stood, uncertain. Tamara rushed to embrace him. Bellini stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the mic, voice trembling slightly, "tonight was meant to be a celebration of my career. but I believe we have just witnessed the beginning of a greater one." The audience rose in ovation. Behind the curtain, a reporter scribbled furiously into her notebook. A videotech whispered into his headset, "We caught all of it. Every second." But Elijah, holding his mother's hand, only asked, "Did they like it?" Tamara kissed his forehead. "They loved it, baby." Backstage, Bellini approached them. "Elijah, would you consider joining me for the rest of the performance? As my special guest." Elijah's fingers tightened on his cane. I think I'd like that." As the curtain drew shut and the staff prepared for the next act, no one in the room knew that this performance would be shared around the world within hours. That a boy who had never seen a sunrise would soon become the light in thousands of lives. But for now, all Elijah knew was the feel of the keys beneath his fingers and the sound of applause echoing through his soul. In the days following the performance, Elijah Carter's name appeared across news outlets, social media feeds, and dinner-table conversations. What was meant to be a quiet evening of tribute had become an international sensation. The video of Elijah's spontaneous performance went viral, capturing hearts around the globe. Critics lauded his playing as miraculously expressive and historically profound. But Elijah remained grounded. Fame, to him, was just another frequency, a new sound in the world he interpreted through vibrations and emotion. Back in their small apartment in Harlem, Elijah sat at his mother's old upright piano, letting his fingers drift across the chipped keys. Fame had not changed his routine. He still practiced every morning, still listened to birdsong from the window, and still asked his mother to describe the colors of the sky. "They want you to go on Good Morning America," Tamara said, holding her phone and trying to hide the nervous tremble in her voice. Elijah turned toward her. "Will there be a piano?" Tamara laughed, relief evident in her tone. "Probably. Then I'll go." The television studio was a world apart from the concert hall. Bright lights buzzed above them, and the air smelled of hairspray and electronics. Elijah remained calm, seated beside Bellini, who had taken a personal interest in mentoring him. During the interview, Bellini spoke of Elijah with the reverence one might reserve for a master. "He doesn't just play the piano. He speaks through it. With clarity and honesty most musicians spend their whole lives chasing." Elijah, modest and soft-spoken, simply said, "I play what I feel." After the segment aired, more invitations came: Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, European tours. But amidst all the attention, Elijah had only one question: "Can we still play at the community center on Saturdays?" Tamara knelt beside him. "Of course, baby. No matter where you go, never forget where you started." Bellini agreed. "Fame is loud, but purpose is quiet. Your purpose began long before the spotlight." 1 week later, Elijah and Bellini were invited to perform a duet at the United Nations Cultural Summit. Delegates from around the world filled the elegant hall. Bellini had arranged for Elijah to begin the piece solo, with the maestro joining midway. As Elijah sat before the grand piano, a hush swept the room. He paused, lifted his hands, and began to play. What emerged was a piece of his own creation, a melody neither rehearsed nor planned. It was a musical letter to the world. Gentle chords blossomed into soaring refrains. Notes wept, laughed, and told stories without words. Halfway through, Bellini joined him, subtly weaving in counterpoint harmonies. The two played as if connected by an unseen thread. Though their styles differed, Bellini's refined, Elijah's raw and spiritual, they merged into something unearthly. By the final chord, not a single person remained unmoved. After the performance, a diplomat from South Africa approached them. "Your music reminded me of my mother's prayers." "Thank you." Backstage, Bellini sat beside Elijah. "What did you see in your mind while you played?" "I saw people," Elijah said. "Alone. Scared. Then I saw them hearing the music and smiling. I wanted them to feel less alone." Bellini placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have a rare gift, Elijah. One the world needs. But fame is never without pressure." Soon, managers, agents, and record labels began knocking. Everyone wanted a piece of the Prodigy. Offers poured in, some promising millions. Tamara remained cautious. "He's still a child," she reminded them. "This is not a commodity." Bellini, ever watchful, stepped in to shield Elijah from exploitation. "He will perform on his terms. No contracts without his consent and his mother's." Elijah, sensing the shift, asked his mother one night, "Why are people trying to own my music?" Tamara kissed his forehead. "Because when something beautiful appears in the world, some try to cage it. But we won't let them." "Then I'll just keep playing," Elijah said. "For me. And for anyone who needs to hear." That night, he composed a new piece. He called it The Listener's Prayer. It would become the theme for a worldwide charity initiative. And it wasn't finished yet. Months passed. Elijah Carter's story had traveled far beyond concert halls and television screens. His music now echoed in war-torn countries, poverty-stricken villages, and crowded city schools. The piece he wrote, The Listener's Prayer, became an anthem of hope. Played by musicians of all backgrounds, it transcended language and borders. With Bellini's help, Elijah and Tamara established the Sound Beyond Sight Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing music education to blind and visually impaired children around the world. Donations poured in from grateful fans, philanthropic organizations, and even heads of state. But Elijah remained the same boy who listened to birds at his window. He still asked his mother about the color of clouds. Still paused before each song to feel the world around him. He never played the same piece the same way twice. He believed music was a living thing. It changed with the listener, with the moment. One afternoon, while rehearsing with Bellini at Carnegie Hall, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, the envelope simple. Inside, a note from a young girl named Hannah in Syria. "Dear Elijah, my village was bombed. I lost my father. We have no electricity, but someone played your music on a battery radio. I listened with my eyes closed. I felt like my father was hugging me again. Thank you." Elijah wept quietly. Bellini sat beside him. "This is why we play." Elijah was later invited to perform for the World Humanitarian Summit. World leaders gathered not to debate, but to listen. He walked onto the stage alone. No speech. No fanfare. Just music. He began with a soft, lingering chord, almost like a breath. Then came a melody that rose like dawn. It wasn't written on paper. It couldn't be. Each note spoke of sorrow and recovery, of hands held in the dark, of silent prayers and unspoken courage. And then, a pause. A single breath. And a final fragile note that seemed to hang in the air longer than nature allowed. When it ended, there was no applause at first. Just silence. Reverent, full-bodied silence. Then slowly, as if moved by something sacred, the room stood. World leaders wiped their eyes. Soldiers, presidents, poets, all applauding not just a performance, but a healing. Afterward, a young boy from the refugee choir approached him. "You played what I feel but couldn't say." Elijah reached for his hand. "Then we understand each other." Back in Harlem, life remained simple. Tamara kept the old upright piano polished. She turned down every offer to relocate to mansions or high-rises. "This is where his soul lives," she told reporters. Bellini visited often. He no longer performed as much. He said he had found his successor, and more than that, his purpose. "When I first saw Elijah," Bellini said in an interview, "I asked him to play just for fun. I had no idea he would end up playing for the world." Years later, Elijah would compose a symphony titled The Echo of Light. It would premiere with an orchestra composed of blind musicians from over 40 nations. The audience, families of the children who had once been touched by his early songs. And at the center of it all, Elijah would sit in silence, eyes closed, hands hovering above the keys, waiting, listening, and then he would play. Not for the fame, not for the applause, but for every soul still waiting to be heard, for the invisible, the unheard, the forgotten. Because he knew. Sometimes, the greatest gift is not seeing the world, but hearing it completely.